Just to let everybody know, we are going to be recording this meeting. And please put your name, pronouns, and your organization in the chat. Julie, let me know when you're ready to start or when you want to start.
Okay, let's start.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the swim, the first, right, of this year, swim public members meeting. Once again, put your name, pronouns, and organization in the chat so that we know who is in the room and we'll have a record of your attendance. I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that it has been a really difficult year for the last 12 months. We're still in the pandemic. There's been a lot of things happening beyond the pandemic. And I hope that you all can take a moment from time to time to take a deep breath and be kind to yourself. Sometimes I think we forget that we take our work so seriously. We forget to take care of ourselves. But I wanted to give everyone a reminder that it's really important for us to take a moment just to tend to our needs. So I wanted to give us that moment. And as part of that exercise, I'm going to do a little poll because no Zoom meeting is complete without polling. So here we go. You can select as many as you like. And if you're co-host, you can't do this, unfortunately. But if you're not a co-host, then how are we feeling today? I love seeing fantastic and calm, happy and energized. But it's okay if you're feeling meh or angry. That's okay too, but nobody's feeling hurt. That's a good thing. All right, we've got 81% of people voting, so I'm going to share the poll result quickly before we move on to the next. We are feeling calm. I love that. It somehow seems very fitting for a group of clean water folks. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Julie. So Julie, take us away.
All right, thank you. Thanks everyone for taking the time to be here today with us for our first public meeting of the year and to join us for some updates from Mikkel Adget from the Department of Environmental Protection, who's going to provide us with some updates on a few key topics that we'll be focused on this year. I'm also going to do a quick run through of SWIM's 2021 priorities for the year. And before I do that, I want to put our agenda up so that folks can have a look at what we're going to do in the meeting today. Anna, if you can please share the agenda document when you get a chance. I want to thank Chino for her opening remarks. I think that's how we yielded the calm response to the poll. So thank you for that, Chino. And thank you also for hosting this meeting on your Zoom account. We do appreciate it. I also just want to take a minute and recognize all of the Swim Coalition member organizations who over the past year have just truly astounded me with all of the work that you've been doing, the quick ways that you adapted to really challenging circumstances in our midst, and the work that you continue to do. It is an honor to be part of this organization and to interact with all of you. So thank you to the Swim Coalition members whose work is truly amazing and does enormous good for the entire city of New York. As Shino mentioned, we do want to have everyone please put your name and organization and pronouns in the chat box. And we are recording this session and we'll post it on a YouTube channel to share it with folks who aren't able to attend today. And there is one person who I really must thank for an enormous amount of work over the past couple of years, and that's Anna Yee, a recent graduate student from the Pratt Institute, whose work has been sustaining us now for almost 2 years. She was a Pratt Fellow with us and then has stayed on to work with us throughout 2020 and then this year too. So thank you, Anna, for all of your work. So we are going to run through quickly a review of SWIM's priorities. There will be some links in the chat to details about some of these topics, which I'm going to skim over right now for the sake of time. And then we'll dig into 3 of the topics in more detail in a conversation with Mikkel Adkett, who is the Advisor for Strategic Planning for the Department of Environmental Protection Bureau of Public Affairs. And we welcome Mikkel and thank you for joining us today. And then we'll have a presentation about a really innovative project over in Long Island City that Newtown Creek Alliance is working on with LaGuardia College. Holly Porter Morgan, who is also a member of the SWIM Steering Committee and leads a group of students at LaGuardia College on a series of initiatives with the Newtown Creek Alliance, is going to join Willis to talk about the Dutch Kills Loop project. So that's the agenda for today. And I'll start now and just do a quick run through what SWIM's 2021 priorities are going to be as it stands right now for the year. Recently, we've been watching closely some proposed amendments by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, in which they are proposing most recently a new set of standards by which New York City's Class I and SD waterways will be assessed for bacteria. And the new criteria is the Enterococcus criteria, which we've wanted them to start using, but it's our understanding that they're proposing to use it only in certain segments of certain water bodies and at a lower standard than the EPA recommends and requires. And so they held a hearing slash webinar on the 23rd of March, which some of us attended, and they received comment letters from the public yesterday on this proposed amendment, which in our minds is paired with a proposed amendment that they made in late 2019 and throughout 2020, which was to remove some very important protective language of our Class I and SD waters. And so these two actions combined with one another are something that we're watching very closely and very concerned about, because it appears that the state is sort of relegating these waters to a place where they're not going to be made clean enough for primary recreation, primary contact recreation. And that's very concerning for us because many of these waters in that category are already being used for primary contact recreation. So we've submitted comment letters, which we'll post on the SWIM library of letters. And we thank the city council members, Levin and Reynoso, for the letters that they sent to the state in partnership with us to help us try and ascertain from the state their justification, explanation, and rationale for these moves, because that's really where we feel the public is in the dark. We don't understand the rationale for these actions. And so we'll keep everyone posted as we learn more, but we have asked and offered to facilitate a stakeholder discussion to learn more about the state's general long-term view on why they've made these two actions. that is a priority that we'll continue to keep at the top of our to-do list throughout the year this year and keep you all posted on the status of these two proposals. One of the comments that was made by Newtown Creek Alliance at the public hearing the other day, which I thought was really important and useful, and that is, the state said that this hearing was also going to be a webinar. And so we thought that they would be providing some explanation and some information to help us understand the actions, and that, the general public and general waterway user does not know what the geometric mean criteria are for a water body. And so we need some explanations. And so thank you, Willis, for your comments at the hearing. And we'll look forward to getting some response from DEC soon. And then the three items that we're going to talk with Mikkel about today are also, of course, on our priority list. And those are the DEP water rate study, some delays that we have learned about in the long-term control plans, and the forthcoming unified stormwater rule, which we're very excited about and we think is really going to make a big difference in the way New York City manages our stormwater. So we'll look forward to taking a deep dive into each of those topics with Mikkel in a minute. And then the other thing that we're keeping an eye on are the city's green infrastructure incentive programs. The Green Roof Tax Abatement Program has recently been renewed and updated, and it now has some designated priority districts that align with the priority districts that DEP has set forth for the long-term control plans, as well as a whole host of other important criteria, such as the heat index and other health department criteria that would make a community district a priority area in which a higher abatement amount would be allowed for installing a green roof on private property. And there is also a new green infrastructure incentive program that is slated to kick off this year that DEP is introducing, which would be managed by a third-party administrator. And that's for large private property sites. I think it's 50,000 square feet and above. And we'll have Mikkel just confirm that with us when we talk about it. And all of these green infrastructure incentive programs are really coming to the fore, and we need them to be in place to support the city's new sustainable roof laws that were just part of the Climate Mobilization Act, in which it will require retrofits and new roofs to look into installing either vegetated systems or solar systems or both on new rooftops. And so if we have these incentives in place, it will help support people's ability to install these new green infrastructure solutions that we need in order to better manage stormwater runoff in the city and meet our 2030 goals. So we'll keep everyone updated on those incentive programs. And then we're also watching closely for the DEP's annual report on the MS4 Stormwater Management Plan. The draft will come out in May for public comments. So we'll want to gather public comments and provide them back to DEP on that. Also, we're excited and looking forward to learning more about a feasibility study that DEP will be tasked with for exploring a new wastewater treatment plant on Rikers Island when that gets deactivated. And the study will explore placing a new wastewater treatment plant there and what that might yield in the way of reduction in CSO volume and, of course, a better wastewater management system overall. We're very excited to watch over the next couple of years the development of a new piece of legislation that just passed through City Council, Intro 2092, which would require all capital projects to be built with the framework of climate resilient design guidelines. And we recognize the Waterfront Alliance and their Rise to Resilience Coalition for all the work they did to ensure that the public was aware of Intro 2092 and that it got passed. And we want to bring to your attention, if you haven't already seen, the city's environmental justice report for all. We have a link in the chat that you can link to that report, and public comments on that report are due by April 30th. So be sure you weigh in on that report and give your input. And then the other things that we're watching are the Army Corps of Engineers stormwater barriers study that got canceled has now been reinstated, but it needs to be funded. It's been reinstated with a more robust public outreach program, as well as acknowledgement of sea level rise, which were two efforts that were underway by Riverkeeper and Rise to Resilience Coalition. So we're glad that it's been reinstated. Now we need to call on Congress to fund it so that it can get underway and that we can keep an eye on it as the study develops. And lastly, we are watching the Restore Mother Nature Bond Act at the state level. We want to be sure that that gets back on the ballot. And we're working with lots of other members of stakeholders and members of various coalitions to ensure that it does get back on the ballot. SWIM had the opportunity to sit on an infrastructure panel at a recent New York League of Conservation Voters Candidates Forum. I sat on the panel with Newtown Creek Alliance and the Nature Conservancy, in which we were able to inform elected officials about the city's stormwater and wastewater infrastructure and green infrastructure solutions to address CSO pollution in our waters. We always want to keep all of our electeds informed of our advocacy work and the systems that need to be prioritized. So maybe if we get some stimulus money for New York City infrastructure, we can make sure that our electeds apply some of it to stormwater and wastewater. And that is the list right now of priorities that we're working on. We will issue a meeting report from this meeting so that you can access each of these topics and links to greater details about them. But right now, I'm going to ask Mikkel to join me in a conversation about three of our priorities that we're going to focus on today. Mikkel, it's up to you as to which topic you want to start with. I think probably folks want to know about the LTCP delays. If we
Sure. Thank you so much, Julie. I do have a couple of slides just because we are going to go through a lot of information. I think I start with the Stormwater Rule, but I can skip ahead to LTCP if you prefer.
Start with that. And then I think Anna needs to give you screen sharing, or you have screen sharing.
I think I have it.
Yeah, you should be able to, Mikkel, because you're co-host.
Okay, and folks, please be sure to put your questions in the chat box where Shino and Anna will be compiling them, and we'll make sure that we get at least a few of them answered here on the conversation today, and then the rest of them we can answer in our meeting report post-meeting.
Okay, I'm sorry, Julie. Did you want me to skip to LTCPs, or
if you could, I think that would be a good place to start.
Sure, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mikkel Adgate. Calling in from New York City DEP. I think I know most, if not all of you, so it's definitely a pleasure to be here after a very long year, as Shino mentioned. So, in preparation for this, I know many of you were a part of our LTCP public participation program that kicked off back in 2012. Between 2012 and just last fall, 2020, we submitted 11 long-term control plans to the state. Of those 11, 9 of them were approved by the state. 2 are still under review. And so I do want to just give kind of an update on the ones that had active projects associated with them. So for the first one, and we're going kind of just in alphabetical order, for Alley Creek, for those of you who recall, the approved plan from DEC was a disinfection facility at one of the CSO outfalls. And in discussion with the state and in discussion with many of the stakeholders, some of whom are on the call and some of whom are based in the Alley Creek area, we have been talking to the state about a design alternative that is not disinfection. And we had a small public meeting about this, I think last January or February, not too long before the city shut down, to talk through the alternatives that we're in discussion with the state on. And these are sort of like wetlands, more ecological projects. And so those discussions with the state are ongoing. So the disinfection, design for disinfection is on hold while we continue these discussions for project alternatives. So that's the status for Alley Creek. For Bronx River, the DEC approved plan was hydraulic relief at outfalls HP 007 and HP 009, as well as a bending weir and baffle at HP 011. The current status for that project is back in October, we submitted a technical memo to the state about a sort of cost-effective modification to the scope. So a change to the design that would still have the same CSO reduction and water quality goals from the approved plan, but would be a modification to the approved design. And the state is currently reviewing that. And that's a similar thing with the Hutchinson River. So the DEC approved plan was disinfection and floatables control. And we recently submitted to the state a request to modify that design to eliminate the disinfection project in favor of a storage facility. So I recognize that this is a lot of information. And one thing I want to be clear about in terms of these changes to the approved plans is that we do intend to have public meetings about our proposals for each and every one of these projects. We have come up with a proposal that we submitted to the state in terms of public meetings. I think many of you know that while the LTCP process had a very kind of clear public engagement outline, right? Like for each LTCP, we had a kickoff meeting. We had a meeting where we talked about alternatives, and we, went through concept plans. And then we had our sort of final meeting where we talked about the project that was submitted to the state. Right now, where we are for these discussions, I see that public participation as just a continuation of those early meetings, so that we're constantly coming back to you and saying what our current thinking is. So while I don't yet have a schedule or like timeline for these meetings, I expect that we'll be having them sooner rather than later, so that we can talk you through really the nitty-gritty details of what we're thinking about. But if you're interested in understanding what we've discussed with the state so far, our letters for Bronx River and Hutchinson River are available on the DEP website, as is the technical memo that we prepared for the Bronx River. So, if you're interested in kind of understanding where we are before those public meetings kick off, you're welcome to do that. So just going on to Flushing Creek, that also the DEC approved plan was a disinfection facility for TI 10 and TI 11, as well as floatables control. In terms of the current status, we're looking to do a pilot scale disinfection study at the current CSO tank to better inform the design parameters. Some of you might remember that we did a disinfection pilot for Spring Creek that ended in about 2017, 2018, if I recall. So this would be a different scale pilot so that we can look specifically at the Flushing Creek drainage area and get better information before going fully into design. And so again, that will be something, if you were involved with the Swim Coalition at that time, we did multiple presentations about that Spring Creek pilot, including meetings after that was done. And we would do the same thing here, so that folks are informed as we're making progress. Flushing Bay, the DEC approved plan was the CSO storage facility. Last fall, we sent a letter to the state proposing to defer this project due to just the fiscal uncertainties related to the pandemic. As I'm sure many of you are aware, the city in general and DEP in particular has, a lot of sort of uncertain realities in terms of our finances for the future, right? And so we, like many other agencies, are thinking through our planning. And so we have proposed to defer this project. And so the state has that request at this time. And I think we shared that letter that we sent to the state with many of you last fall, as well as the elected officials and community boards and neighborhood associations near Flushing Bay, so that we could be transparent on what we're thinking at this time. For Newtown Creek, the DEC approved plan is the CSO storage tunnel and an upgrade at our Borden Avenue pump station. At this time, we are on track for all of those consent order milestones. We have not had a public meeting related to this, but we were at the last Newtown Creek CAG meeting, not the last one, but I think, Willis, it might have been January or February. Time is a construct that I'm struggling with lately. But at some point in 2021, we kind of went through where we are for the Newtown Creek. So that is really the status update for the 6 LTCPs that are sort of in the works at the moment. The Jamaica Bay LTCP and the citywide East River, those 2 LTCPs are still under review with the state. There is, contact between the city and the state on those 2 as we provide supplemental information and address questions. But at this time, neither of them have been approved.
Mikkel, is there also a storage tank project for the Gowanus Canal that is on hold?
So that I don't have that here. I know it gets a little bit confusing, but technically the 2 storage tanks for the Gowanus are not LTCP projects. Right. Those projects are a part of the Superfund program. And so I know that there's been discussions with EPA. I think you might recall that at one point we had requested changing those tanks to a tunnel similar to what we have in the works for Newtown Creek and Flushing Bay. EPA rejected that proposal, and so the tanks are moving forward.
Okay, great. And then in regards to pandemic related budget constraints, are there any impacts on the green infrastructure program, that kind of runs alongside these long-term control plans in a way?
Yeah, so let me just to go through GI. I want to make sure that folks are clear that GI continued through 2020. We were able to have it included in the contracts that continued throughout the pandemic. And, thankfully we were able to keep our contractors and our staff safe throughout that time. There was a lot of concern, but In terms of the overall GI program, that is still moving forward. We are not anticipating any cuts to that program as it relates to the budget, but we did experience some delays. So even though we were able to, construct 3,000 assets throughout 2020, and we were managing 19 contracts throughout that time, we had anticipated certifying our 2015 milestone at the end of 2020. But we were unable to do that because of some COVID-19 related delays. And that was mainly due to contracting and cash flow. So if, for those of you who remember kind of like April, May 2020 across the city, there were a lot of challenges just in terms of getting money out the door and getting contracts registered, because there was such a huge emphasis on other contracting needs, right? The city was in production on masks and ventilators and all of that. So there were delays for other infrastructure related projects. So because of that, we were not able to certify the 2015 milestone. That's the most significant COVID related delay for the GI program. I do think that we'll be able to certify it this year, because we are making progress in contract registration. And then just a reminder that the 2020 contingency plan is due on June 30th. So we will be submitting that to the state this year.
Okay.
And then of course, more details about all of this that I'm laying out very quickly will be available in our 2020 Green Infrastructure Annual Report. So that will be coming out on April 30th.
Okay. April 30th.
Julie, I've got a few LTCP related questions. Do you want us to wait, or do you want to?
Yeah, let's go ahead to those now, and then we'll get to the Unified Stormwater Rule, which I want to spend a good amount of time on.
So I'm just going to allow people to ask their own questions. Ira, if you'd like to pose your question by unmuting yourself, go ahead. Ira, can you hear me? Okay, I will read his question. Will DEP ever pay for an Oyster Castle installation? New York City Parks just did one in Little Neck Bay, and DEP stands to gain immensely.
So I will be honest, I'm not familiar with an Oyster Castle. I will say that we've been very involved in oyster restoration projects, some that we've done on our own, some that we've done in collaboration with the Billion Oyster Project. So I'll say that we will continue to look at opportunities for ecological projects that, in terms of oyster restoration. I'm not personally familiar with Parks Oyster Castle, but I'm sure that John McLaughlin and his ecological restoration team is. And if they weren't directly involved in project management with that, then there was certainly collaboration because we work closely with Parks.
So might I check with John McLaughlin? Thank you for the answer.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
Appreciate it.
Brad, would you like to unmute yourself and ask about the Gowanus Canal CSO tank?
Sure, thank you so much. This is Brad Vogel with the Gowanus Dredgers Canoe Club. And Mikkel, thanks for being here. One question about the Gowanus CSO tanks, the two of them that are supposed to be built. With respect to the mid-canal CSO tank, wondering if DEP will commit to holding a public input session on the design of that facility. The community advisory group that consults with EPA on the Gowanus Superfund did pass a formal resolution requesting public input sessions on the design back in summer of 2020.
Yeah, I think it's always been our intention to have public meetings and to do public engagement related to all of our projects. So, I'm sure that you are familiar with Alicia West, who does our public design outreach and does our
Right.
community meetings and public meetings related to those projects. So we can certainly talk offline about uh, the specific opportunities there. I'm sorry, I don't have more of a timeline in my mind for that. But I can certainly circle back with you this week.
Okay, great. Yeah, that would be helpful because we've noticed that RFPs have in fact been issued for aspects of the design of that site. So it would be
Yeah.
great to get a public input session set up as soon as possible.
I got you.
Thank you.
Mike, sorry, Brad. Mike, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thanks for the update, Miguel. It's good to see you. I didn't see, maybe I missed it, an update on Coney Island Creek or Westchester Creek. What's going on with those?
Yeah, so if you remember, those LTCPs did not propose new projects. What was submitted was basically that we had, met the goals during the water body and watershed facility plan project. So for Coney Island, that was the Avenue V pump station upgrade, and for Westchester, that was I want to say some sewer work that was done at that time. I think bending weirs and baffles as well. So those were the two LTCPs that were approved that were kind of like the no action LTCPs, which is why they weren't on this list.
Thanks. And what's going on with the citywide?
Yeah, so again, we submitted that to the state late. That went in, I think, in September of 2020. And so that's still being reviewed. And as the state, has questions for us, we're responding to them, but I don't know, when we can expect a decision on it.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Okay, those are the questions that came in, so we can move on to the next segment.
Actually, Sheena, I'm a little
Yep.
confused here. Do I see Sean Dixon?
Yes, you
dropped into the
do. Sean is here
coalition
with us. Isn't it great? We're going to put you
Howdy.
on the spot, Sean.
Welcome back, Sean.
He says he never left.
Oh, okay.
You never left. Okay.
It's good to see y'all too. Thanks for the updates.
Okay. Anything else on GI before we move? Oh, can you provide an update on that new incentive program for large private properties, Mikkel?
Yeah. So the good news is that contract made it through COVID and was registered. And I don't say that lightly, in the sense that we and a lot of other city agencies, lost a lot of planned work that we, had really invested a lot of time and years of energy into, that just couldn't get registered. So that that contract did go through. So that means that program will stand up and we will have it. You are right, Julie, it will be for large impervious area, 50,000 square feet or more, with a third-party administrator to help with the flow, and without a lot of the legal requirements that is associated with our current grant program. So if you remember, our current grant requires basically like a legal document that's applied against the property to ensure that the green infrastructure asset is protected. And it's not the right fit for every property in New York City. So we had a lot of properties over the years that were really interested in doing GI, but weren't willing to sign on to the restrictive covenant. So the fact that we'll be able to move forward with this work without that requirement is going to be good. So, as soon as we are able to provide an update on the kickoff for that and that work going out. I know that will certainly need a lot of support in helping to spread the word.
And you had set aside some $53 million for the program. Will that still be available through the budget?
Yeah, that number sounds right. I haven't looked at that line in a while, but my understanding is that, the full thing went through.
And this is in the combined sewer area of the city only. So
Yeah.
it's within the combined sewer area of the city.
That's right.
And it's a whole array of GI solutions that folks can install to manage stormwater on site.
Exactly.
This is exciting.
It is exciting. And I think not only does it reflect a lot of the work that our green infrastructure team has done over the years, the research and development portion to see which types of GI assets are most effective and what types of soil, but also, all of the work from those here in the SWIM coalition to help us better understand what the barriers were for the incentive programs that we had, and to really think critically about how we could get properties to participate. So I see it as a collaborative effort, and the timing is working out really well as it coincides with our sort of pivot towards private property, right? So on the public property side, we've got 10 years under our belt between what we've been doing in the right of way, on public schools, on NYCHA, on other city-owned property. Like you can see it here, as of last year, we had over 10,000 green infrastructure assets in the ground, working, functional, over 1,200 greened acres. And now, as we are seeing this pivot to private property with the Unified Stormwater Rule, with the additional legislation that Julie mentioned at the beginning, and then also with the incentive opportunities, we see our program becoming much more holistic across the city, and really, continuing to be what it has been, which is, the largest GI program in the country, but, really doing the work that we all anticipate that it do, which is improve water quality overall. And
Right.
I'm surprised that Shino didn't kick off by talking about the dolphins in the East River
I know.
last week.
Saw that on your first presentation page. That was great.
I wanted to focus on people.
Right.
Yeah. Well, this is a good reminder that nearly half of all the targeted land that we have to manage to meet our 2030 goals for managing stormwater above ground is private property. So this will really help us, move closer to the 2030 goals of managing that for 10% of the impervious area. The first inch of stormwater runoff in 10% of the impervious area of the combined sewer portion.
Yeah, that was the initial goal of the green infrastructure plan. I think that, we're seeing, as the program has matured, a shift towards thinking about it volumetrically so that we can think about CSO control. And so there's a lot more information about that in the GI annual report to help better clarify what we mean by green acres and that work.
Great. Well, let's talk about the Unified Stormwater Rule so that we want to try and finish up and give Willis a solid amount of time for he and Holly to present the Dutch Kills Loop project. But the Unified Stormwater Rule is going to apply citywide. That's a very exciting aspect of this forthcoming rule. We've had these sort of parallel programs running for the MS Forest part of the city and the combined sewer part of the city. And now this rule is going to apply citywide. So very positive advancement towards more holistic thinking. Take it away, Michelle.
Yeah, no, that's the perfect way to describe it. As our regulatory requirements have changed between the 2012 consent order, the 2015 MS4 permit. We had already done some work with the 2012 Stormwater Rule. It was becoming clear that we needed to think about our strategy citywide, so that if you are a developer and you're working on property, you don't have different rules depending on what part of the city that you're in, right? That we can streamline it and really consolidate all of the existing regulations. So this is going to affect all new construction in the combined and separately sewered areas, because in addition to, you know, the stormwater construction and the work we've done on that permitting system, it also includes updates to our site connection rule. So right at that point where you're coming to us to connect to our sewer system. So it's modifying, you know, two different parts of our regulations. And it really prioritizes infiltration and green infrastructure and ensures that you can get credit for green infrastructure as you're doing that site connection. So many of you were with us as we worked to get our legislation passed last summer. And so we have been full steam ahead working on the stormwater rule and the accompanying design manual. So the idea is that, you know, if you are a developer and you're coming to us, you have a manual that you can take right off the shelf that tells you exactly what you need to do to comply with the rule. And so we're finalizing that. We will be doing an interagency review, because if you think about, you know, the number of projects that the School Construction Authority, NYCHA, Department of Design and Construction, all of our agency colleagues take on, we want to make sure that they're very crystal clear about the new requirements and where it fits in their design review and registration, contract registration processes. And we'll also be doing additional stakeholder outreach. And I know that we've done a lot of meetings with you all throughout the process, but we want to make sure to have the opportunity to do it again when the rule is close to final and when we have that design manual, because we know that there's, you know, feedback that many stakeholders who do this work can provide for us. And then we will initiate the formal CAPA process. So that's the Citywide Administrative Procedure Act. That is how a draft rule becomes an actual rule for city requirements. That also has opportunity for public feedback, but we really hope that we've done so much public engagement by the time we get to that point that folks feel like they understand what the requirements and the opportunities are there. So all of those next steps are underway as we speak.
And Mikkel, is there a lot size that this rule applies to that you're going to specify in the rule?
Yes and no. So the yes portion is that all new construction is impacted regardless of lot size because of the changes to the site connection requirements.
Got it.
Excuse me, that's the no. The yes is that 20,000 square foot threshold that was recommended during our MS4 stormwater management program plan development. If you remember, we recommended lowering the threshold from 1 acre to 20,000 square feet. So that is that threshold. But what's happening is that instead of that 20,000 square foot threshold being the case for just for MS4, it's going to include CSO areas now too. So it's lowering and expanding at the same time, but think of it as going above and beyond that site connection rule that impacts everybody.
Okay. Do we want to stop for questions on this and green infrastructure before we move to the water rate study?
Lionel, do you want to go ahead?
Hi, Mikkel. Thanks for giving us another wonderful update. As always, good to see you. I'm sorry for not showing my face.
You're forgiven. It's a bit, it's
The
a bit
logo up.
face, right?
With the tax break priority areas, is there any plan by DEP or other city agencies to do outreach within these priority area communities to get community organizations or businesses or even residents to understand their opportunity there?
Yeah, I can't speak for the mayor's office. They're the ones that have been really leading the tax abatement work. But I do know that by and large, they do a lot of public outreach for all of their different programs. And so I assume that that would be included here as well. But I don't know the specifics since that's being led by a different team.
And I'll just chime in for a quick minute. So the Green Roof Tax Abatement Working Group, which SWIM is a member of, we actually had a member of this working group go to the Department of Buildings to say the website needs to be updated because the website they had on the Green Roof Tax Abatement had not been updated, and it still had $4.25 per square foot on it. So we're going to be trying to hold the Department of Buildings accountable by making sure they post the right information on the website.
And we'll also be helping get the word out about these new priority areas and how they got designated, and that it's a higher abatement amount now. So I think more to come on that over the next few months. There will probably be some webinars about it. I think we're going to be able to get the word out about it for sure. Thank you for that question, Lionel. And we have a link to SWIM's blog post about the Green Roof Tax Abatement Program and the newly designated priority areas. So if folks want to click on that, you can get more information about that program. Okay. So there's a water rate study that will be underway over the next few years, which DEP is conducting. And it's something that SWIM has been watching now for quite some time. And we've provided lots of recommendations for the study to have a very robust public outreach process. And that Citizens Advisory Committee be formed and have a very diverse array of stakeholders at the table. And we're happy to say that that is going to be the case for this study. And you might wonder why SWIM would be interested in the water rates, but we have a blog post about that that goes into detail, and I don't want to spend a ton of time explaining it, but cities around the country have restructured their water rates to better account for a property, how much stormwater runoff a property generates, and for those who generate a lot to pay their fair share. And so part of this study is going to analyze what a rate restructuring in New York would look like so that we can also follow along in the way that other cities have to better account for the stormwater runoff a property generates. And so that's why we are following this study and very excited about it coming to the fore. And so, Mikkel, I'll let you give the lowdown on it.
Yeah, I actually think you might have covered everything for this one. Yeah, so the study kicked off last summer. It is looking at, water and wastewater rate structure options while also looking at customer assistance and credit programs. So really trying to get a holistic look at what the opportunities are. And there's a lot of different goals for the study. We need to think about competing needs, which is something that we think about all of the time, right? So in addition to, our long-term control plan program, where we've committed, upwards of $6 billion to that program. We obviously also have state of good repair needs that we have to think about, not just for our wastewater system, but also our sewer system and upstate in the watershed. So thinking about, if the pie is only so large, how do you balance all of these different needs to ensure that, the entire system is running as effectively as it can, but also thinking about equity and customer affordability. This is so critical, and now especially in this COVID era, as Shino said, and something we're talking about all the time, the pandemic is not over, even though we're certainly more hopeful as more people are getting vaccinated, as people are starting to return to the city and return to the work, but there are a lot of people still hurting, right? There's a lot of people still standing in line at food pantries, a lot of people on the brink of losing the homes that they've lived in. And so we have to think about that when we think about people who pay a water bill. And we've seen a significant increase in the numbers of people who need customer assistance because they can't afford to pay their bills. So thinking about that and equity, rate and revenue stability, and then just compatibility with our billing system. We're currently in the process of upgrading our billing system, which will be a very good change on the back end for our team, but also a good change. I don't know if any of you actually get a water bill from DEP, but it probably looks the same as it did in like the late 80s, early 90s. And so, we're trying to make it easier for folks. And so this will include that, that the study will include thinking about that billing system as well. Julie mentioned the public engagement. So we have been sending out invite letters to a variety of organizations and groups. We've sent it out to about 400 individuals, which is a massive number because it includes all of our elected officials and community boards. It includes neighborhood associations, block associations. It includes individuals who have attended our water rate hearings over the years. It includes businesses, environmental organizations, community organizations. We hope that a lot of people will plan to participate so that we can ensure a really wide array of voices and contribution. And that first meeting will be happening in June 2021, where we can provide an update on where we are in the study. And we'll also be doing a fully public website where we have our presentations, our materials that we're putting out through the study. And we do plan to do some targeted surveys, particularly for our ratepayers, to better understand this sort of equity and customer affordability question. So, we'll stay tuned with all of you on that. Obviously, the SWIM Coalition is a part of this stakeholder group, as is many of the organizations that SWIM represents. If you're interested in participating with that, you can feel free to contact me directly so that we make sure that we have a good representation across the city.
Yeah, this was one of the really big lessons learned that we got from other cities who have gone through the process of restructuring their rates, that the public has got to be informed upfront and take part in the decision-making process around this change, because it's a big change and it's delicate, as Mikkel mentioned. And by the way, thank you to DEP for all that you all have done throughout the pandemic to keep us all safe and to help people with their payment challenges. I know that you have a good program in place, probably one of the better ones in the country. So we appreciate that. And we'll look forward to providing updates on the water rate study. Our friends at NRDC and Riverkeeper produced last year a rate restructuring dashboard, which sort of shows various scenarios and the impacts that the restructuring might have. So we have a blog post about that, which you can access. Anna will put the link up in the chat. You can go to that. There's a report and a dashboard. Mike, I don't know if you have any other comments to make on that.
Nope, we've covered it.
Okay, good.
Julie, can I just plug one thing before I exit stage left? I want to just let you all know about some new resources that we've made available on our website that I think will be particularly helpful for those of you that are either formal or non-formal educators. We've done a series of story maps. Can you all see? I'll see this. We've done a series of story maps that are just really beautiful and amazing. So I just want to quickly click on one. And it's basically like a full virtual tour of the work that we do. So we have one for the watershed, one for the wastewater system, one for green infrastructure. There's videos throughout it. There's additional resources. Our education team has been putting together resources for teachers and educators as a way to really engage with folks that might have like come upstate on tours with us or gone to our wastewater treatment plants and haven't been able to. So please check those out. They're on our website. And I will say they are really stunningly beautiful in terms of the photos and the videos that our team was able to put together. So highly recommend if you have the time and want to share.
Mikhail, would you mind putting that URL in the chat?
Oh,
I'm
not at
having a
all.
little bit of a challenging time finding it on the website.
Okay, yes,
Thanks.
I will
Thank
do that
you.
now.
And Mikkel, on the stormwater rule, remind me if there is a public, if there's a date for a public convening of any kind regarding the stormwater rule that you have on your calendar that we should know about.
Not yet, but I promise you will be the first to know as soon as I do.
Okay, great. The Gowanus Canal Conservancy has been working closely with us and producing a great set of tools that are sort of in tandem with some input that we want to provide for the stormwater rule as we move forward. And those of you who attended our last public meeting may recall that Amy Motzi put together a presentation on this concept of net zero CSO. Amy, I don't know if you're still on the line, if you want to mention that at all, but that concept of net zero CSO is something that we think the stormwater rule can help us build awareness of in terms of, managing stormwater near or where it falls on site so that it doesn't inundate our system is the goal, right, for all new sites. So Amy, if you have any updates or comments on net zero CSO, you're welcome to.
Sure. Yeah, I think Mikkel did a really good job of summarizing things today, and we're really looking forward to the next release of any public facing documents, particularly the manual. And I think, one thing that we are really concerned about in Gowanus is just the flexibility in adaptive infrastructure practices. I think acknowledging that places like Gowanus have a high water table and the infiltration opportunities might not be feasible. So I think other places like the Bronx have an opposite issue. And I think this is a piece that we're going to be continuing to talk with DEP on. And we're excited that, so many of their comments thus far have been responsive, and we'll look forward to next steps.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anything else, Mikkel?
Just that I didn't get a chance to talk about it, but I'm going to include a link with information about our COVID testing in wastewater, which is a program that we stood up last summer, just in case folks are interested in knowing more about that.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, but thank you, everyone. I appreciate all of the questions.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Mikhail.
We appreciate your spending time with us today, Mikhail, to give us these updates. It's important. All right, so Willis and Holly are going to walk us through a project over in Long Island City called the Dutch Kills Loop and tell us how they propose to reuse, very innovative reuse of a lot of infrastructure in and around the Dutch Kills tributary of Newtown Creek. So I'll hand it off to you, Willis, to introduce.
Cool. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Mikkel, for the presentation. I definitely didn't want to feel like your time was being cut short to get to this, because there's a lot of important stuff that you went over. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go through this. So I'm going to do most of the presentation. Holly has been involved with this project through LaGuardia and other staff at LaGuardia as well. And of course, feel free to chime in at any point, Holly, if there's anything I'm missing, but I'm going to sort of speak for both of our views on this. So let's see here. Everyone see the presentation here?
Yes.
Okay, so so Dutch Kills Loop project is in the works. So this is a hypothetical approach to creating open space and waterfront access, environmental improvements around the Dutch Kills tributary of Newtown Creek. The project came about through kind of two separate processes. One started in 2015. The Long Island Railroad issued a request for expressions of interest for a decommissioned section of rail line known as the Montauk Cutoff, which is this section here. And a number of local stakeholders, including NCA, submitted a proposal in 2016 called the Montauk Cutoff. The Cutoff Coalition, the Ranch on Rails was the name of the proposal, and about ways that we could take advantage of that space. And then the next year Newtown Creek Alliance began our vision plan with Riverkeeper. And so we kind of expanded upon that original idea of the rail line into a larger sort of public access project known as the Dutch Kills Loop. I'll talk a little bit more about all that in the coming slides. So just as background, I know a number of people on this call are familiar with the creek and probably the Dutch Kills tributary as well. It's one of 5 tributaries on Newtown Creek. And these are just some basic stats I wanted to go through. It's about half a mile long. So it is, kind of a substantial, interesting waterway. There's 5 different bridges. And the reason that is important is because one bridge, the one at the very mouth, is an active rail line. The second one is the decommissioned Montauk Cutoff. But this first one is a bridge that's about 120 years old, and it's essentially rusted shut. And it has an air draft of really only a few feet at high tide. So it's pretty much impossible to get any sizable boat back there. This used to be a very active tributary for shipping, for barges to come in and out. But that hasn't been the case for a few decades now. And that sort of factors into some of our considerations for this waterway. There's currently no true public access to Dutch Kills. The only real way you can get to the water is just by looking at it on some of the bridges that cross it. The waters are very stagnant, especially towards the head end, which is a big issue for water quality, dissolved oxygen levels, CSO. There are a number of CSO outfalls, and currently there's about 160 million gallons a year of combined sewage that enters, and the majority of that is from the pipe at the very head of the inlet. So obviously it's water quality is not great after a rainstorm. Fortunately, as part of the long-term control plan, Mikkel mentioned this very briefly, there is a plan in place to reduce CSO, I believe it's by about 70% for the entire Dutch Kills. And that's that's all basically addressing this massive CSO at the end. So that project will be complete, oh boy, 2030, 2032. I'm blanking on the date, but much sooner than the larger tunnel, which is going to address the rest of the creek. So in many ways, this is an exciting opportunity for us, because we're going to see hopefully a massive improvement in water quality in Dutch Kills before we do in other parts of Newtown Creek. It's a federal, yeah.
DEP has an interesting mitigation pilot project at the head of Dutch Kills too, that is addressing some of the dissolved oxygen. I don't know if folks know about that.
The salt marsh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to mention that as well. There is a handful of sort of little areas on Dutch Kills where the DEP installed a pilot salt marsh, basically bringing back the native shoreline, flora that was here many hundreds of years ago and has been completely eradicated since. So that was a very encouraging investment by DEP, and Dutch Kills we feel like is a prime area of the creek to expand that. So it is a federal Superfund site with the rest of the creek. Anticipated cleanup, is probably not until 2035 at this point. So it is a whiles away, but that is, on the table. And the other thing, just as background, it is still a zone for heavy industrial manufacturing uses around Dutch Kills. And yet with that, we've seen a lot of kind of new types of industry moving in. A lot of sort of tech and science related companies are building new buildings, and a lot of light manufacturing and light industry. So it is sort of transforming a bit from very heavy industrial uses that are maybe, I don't know, less, sometimes conflict a little bit more with things like access and, safer streets and whatnot. So it is a interesting changing area. And then of course it's very close to Long Island City, and some of these areas that are in Greenpoint, some of these areas that are changing very rapidly as well. So just some photos for background. This is the head of the tributary. This is a little turning basin that was once here when there was barge traffic. Photo is taken from LaGuardia Community College. This is the Borden Avenue Bridge, the Long Island Expressway. This is the North Brooklyn Boat Club from a few years ago on a bird watching trip. And this is some of our water quality sampling that we do on a regular basis, which has also been really important. NCA and LaGuardia do water sampling in Dutch Kills tributary, which is valuable because DEP and Riverkeeper do water quality testing on the rest of Newtown Creek and have for like 20 years at this point. But in part because of the low bridge, this tributary kind of gets a little bit overlooked in terms of some of the data collection. So about the Dutch Kills Loop, the idea is that it is a continuous sort of walking path with some main components. It's about over a mile long. And some of these components are on the street. The main section is the Montauk Cutoff, the decommissioned rail line, and then going up along the shoreline as well to 29th Street. One of the big components here that I've already mentioned is LaGuardia College, is sort of like one of the anchor sites. They have a series of buildings that's just a block away from the tributary, and they also are currently finally creating some real open space on the campus, despite having thousands of students coming there every day. It's really just kind of surrounded by parking lots and very busy streets, and so there's such limited open space for the school. Essentially, there's one spot in the middle of the building to access. So if you can kind of see on with my cursor here, behind the C building, there is a new green space that is finally complete, and I believe will be opening this summer. So it's kind of the first open green space that's there. There's also a community garden across the street, LIC Roots, and then there's another community garden over here, Smalling Hogshead Ranch, that we work very closely with, specifically on the Montauk Cutoff proposal. So next slide. So this is the rendering that was from the Riverkeeper vision plan that we did a few years ago. And I just want to sort of throw this out there as a caveat. The vision plan had everything from projects that are in the works to projects that have been talked about for 20 years that would be really great, to projects that are very aspirational in scope, and aren't necessarily tied to feasibilities of costs or certain things like that. So the Dutch Kills Loop project kind of encompass a lot of this, and what we're doing now as a team is sort of going back and sort of reevaluating, okay, what are the most important priorities for this project? Which ones do we feel are most feasible? and how do we get there. So you'll kind of see on here, there's things like a new railway bridge. That would be really great to have a new bridge that isn't rusted shut, but there's nothing really in the pipeline now in terms of funding to make that happen or the logistics. This idea of having a new pedestrian bridge where the decommissioned rail line is something that we've talked about. Again, we have to figure out, what are the logistics and feasibilities of that. So there's a lot of stuff in here. Wetland restoration obviously has already begun, and we feel like there's a lot of opportunity for that going forward. Green roofs, obviously we'd love to see more of that as well. So I'm just going to skip ahead, but this is sort of just the general overall view. And then this connection, really, we'd have to figure out a little bit more of how to sort of cross the creek here with the existing bridge, a new bridge, maybe come down along the shoreline. So Montauk Cutoff, I just wanted to highlight some of these, two of the key sort of main areas. As I mentioned, this is decommissioned rail line owned by MTA. They have no plans to start this again. So we feel like it's a very obvious place to create public access and public space in this area of the creek. It goes over a number of streets, goes underneath the LIE. As you can see, parts of it are very overgrown, obviously reminiscent of the High Line and also like the Queensway project. Although we try to keep our references to the High Line as sort of as a minimum because of this is a very sort of different nature of scope in terms of the area. And then of course it kind of comes to the creek here as well. So these are all photos from Nate Kinzinger. Had a really good essay about it. Where we're at with this is basically that MTA they have no interest in maintaining or owning this site as far as we can tell. They put out this RFEI 5 years ago and want to move forward. So we need to find a way that we can get a proposal to them where we basically take it off their hands. So there's significant questions about ownership, liabilities, access, maintenance of some of these bridge structures, things like that. But certainly it's a very cool, interesting site. Technically it's private property, MTA property, so you shouldn't be going up there, but go check it out. Look at it from the street. Another site that's really kind of key, we feel like, to the Dutch Kills Loop is this section on 29th Street. And there's a few areas here. One is where it hits Dutch Kills. And as you can see, these are all photos from that area. So it is currently fenced off. These are actually, oh, that's Sarah. These are some LaGuardia staff and students who are, trying to do research and observations on the creek and met by a chain link fence, which is really unfortunate. And one of the main features here is there's 2 sunken barges that have been here for a number of decades. There's been so many conversations over the years about how to get these out of here. We're now working with one of Holly's students to try and get actual quotes from contractors and plans in place about how to remove these. And then we could sort of hopefully pursue funding. We feel confident that in the long term, we could get EPA to cover the removal of these as part of the Superfund cleanup. But again, that's not going to be for a very long time. So the idea for this site, I didn't include a rendering or drawing, but essentially is to remove these barges, rebuild the shoreline that you can see is literally crumbling apart and falling into the water, expand the salt marsh. You can see a little bit of it here in the background that DEP started, and create real access to the waterway here. Again, this is a polluted area, but water quality is going to be improving significantly in the next 10 or so years. So a lot of opportunity here. It's also literally catty corner to LaGuardia and that new green space. Part of the work that Holly and her students and the President Society for the Environment. Holly, do you want to give a brief overview?
Yeah, okay. That'd be a good place for me to just jump in and say that real quick. So I can just say that we have a program at LaGuardia called President Society Environment, and the students in that program. So I'm the program manager. There's also 2 other faculty leaders, Ryan Mann-Hamilton and Joby Jacob, who is a huge transportation advocate and is working closely with the Dutch Kills Loop now. the program takes an annual cohort of 20 students and essentially trains them to be environmental activists. And the idea is that the students help identify local environmental issues and design solutions for them. And then after they effect change around the college, they would, take those skills that they learned and then go out and utilize those skills after the year with us, in their own communities, in the world, that kind of thing. So the students actually, in looking for a project this year and, on to next year and the next year, they really said, we would like to have a more green campus. And they decided to take on this area that Willis is talking about, 29th Street and 47th. That area, they decided to really look at that and design it because it is part of our extended campus. So they've created a whole mini vision plan for specifically that area around LaGuardia Community College. And it kind of expands, it includes part of what's in the Dutch Kills Loop and then just outside of that around our campus. And they've been really busy presenting the idea to the college administration, to community groups, including Newtown Creek Alliance, Smiling Hogs Head, the community groups involved in the Dutch Kills Loop. They'll be meeting with the community board too and local electeds. They've met with, many businesses in the area and have gotten a lot of support for it. So they've been doing a great job and learning a lot from the project. So that's my whole spiel.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Holly. It's been great working with the students on this specific aspect and the whole project in general. So this 29th Street, the last thing I'd say about this is that there's a really sort of interesting dynamic here as well, is that 29th Street is technically not a real street. It's not DOT owned. It's a remnant. It's owned by MTA because this was all part of a larger, the Degnon Terminal, which was a major rail line back in the day. And so this street, I mean, as you'll see, there's no sidewalks further down the way. There's basically no signage about directions on the street. They finally changed it to a one-way to go this way. It's basically just filled with, parking. And so it's really, it's not a great space for the businesses because it's not maintained by DOT. So there's a ton of potholes and whatnot. And then it's incredibly, not very safe. Obviously it's falling into the water, but also for any pedestrians here as well. So that, hopefully gives us a little bit of an opportunity to find ways to create access here. And one of the things that we've been talking about for a while is, basically having this be a dead end so that there's not, right now it's just kind of this through street, creating more traffic up here and pedestrian, incidents. And so if it were a dead end, you could actually, turn this area now into more of an open space that would connect to the water. So that's something we're working on with the local businesses to see their feedback about that and the feasibility. And who knows, maybe because it's not DOT property, it might make that process a little bit easier, but lots to be figured out. So with the Dutch Kills Loop, we have 3 sort of primary objectives that we've been working on. And I just want to go through this very briefly and then, have time to open it up to conversation and Q&A. So these are water access and shoreline remediation, public open space, urban agriculture and gardening, supporting the green industry, and of course, green infrastructure and stormwater management, which we all love. So the first one about the first one is water access and shoreline restoration, pretty straightforward. This is not on Dutch Kills. This is sort of just an idea of like what, maybe 29th Street could look like in the future. But, the basic point that was made earlier is that this entire tributary has basically very few places where you can get to it. There's another street end here that we've been doing a lot of cleanup work at the end of Borden. Basically underneath the LIE. And so that's been kind of an interesting place. It's turned into a little bit more of an access spot, but there's a lot of potential to better connect the communities, all the students, all the local workers, and all the surrounding neighborhoods to this waterway. And of course, the shoreline restoration, like I said, we'd love to see the salt marsh expanded. I should have put some more better, some better photos of what the salt marsh looks like, because there are sections that have done really, really well in the past couple of years. And that hopefully will roll out and develop as Superfund progresses. There's an issue about navigability in Dutch Kills. It is still deemed a navigable waterway, even though in reality it is not just because of the bridge, but also because of the depth of the waterway is pretty shallow in a lot of areas as well. So some opportunity. Obviously, public open space we talked about. These are renderings that were part of the proposal we put forward in 2016 for the Montauk Cutoff. So thinking about how we can turn that rail line into open space. The urban ag and the gardening, that obviously a lot of that came out of our work with Smiling Hogshead Ranch. That community garden was established about 10 years ago, and was essentially some local gardeners who saw an empty piece of land and started gardening on it and farming on it, and then learned that it was MTA property, and eventually entered into an MOU, a contract with MTA to remain there. And so it's a really amazing space. It's been a great asset for the community. It's always open, there's no fencing, and so people are free to come in there and hang out amongst the garden and the trees. And we feel like that's a really important opportunity to expand up onto the railways. They've also grown their composting program there significantly in the past year. With COVID, the city shut down the curbside collection. And so this has been a site where they've really grown that operation as well. So those are both components that we would like to see expanded up onto the rails. Obviously, there's, again, a lot of potential of working more closely with LaGuardia and their students. I know that's been a priority over there, is learning about urban agriculture. Supporting the green industry. As I mentioned, this is an industrial area, and we have formed a lot of really good relationships with many of the businesses here. And we also see this as, I think in general within CA, our work is trying to create these environmental improvements and benefits while also, supporting the industries there and maintaining it as a working area. And again, a lot of opportunity for what that could look like in terms of green jobs. And we think, again, the cutoff could be a great place to pilot some of that. And then lastly, green infrastructure and stormwater management. This is a priority area surrounding Dutch Kills, and there's been a significant amount of curbside rain gardens that have gone in, some just a block or two from Dutch Kills, but mostly in Sunnyside and Long Island City, just to the east of Dutch Kills, and it's been really great to see those go in. Having, what Mikkel mentioned earlier about having the opportunities to expand that is really exciting. There are some very large industrial green roofs that are in the sewer shed here, and so we would love to find ways to utilize those and to create more green infrastructure surrounding the area for all the numerous benefits of GI. The other thing I would mention here too is that in relationship to DEP, I didn't put it on here, but there is as part of the upgrade for CSO reduction, DEP is rebuilding the pump house station that's underneath the LIE. And so we hope that that's also an opportunity to maybe get the state DOT a bit interested in ways that they can improve the space underneath the LIE. Right now, it's basically like, I don't know, an unregulated parking zone with that people dump trash in, and there's spots of Phragmites growing in certain areas, and really obvious places to actually collect storm water coming off of the BQE, or sorry, the LIE, because a lot of that goes directly into the CSOs as well. So, again, our sort of whole approach is looking at these major infrastructure assets, some of which are abandoned, some of which are poorly maintained, in ways that we can make those beneficial to both environmental and community needs. So that's it. Dutch Kills Loop. So right now we have a steering committee that's comprised of folks from NCA, Lisa and myself, Smiling Hogshead Ranch, Green Map, and Interval Projects, which is a design architecture firm we've worked with. Also LaGuardia, I need to update this. LaGuardia is now officially part. And then all these other organizations had signed on to the 2016 proposal. So what we're doing now is we're in the process of creating working groups so we can sort of hone in on some of the few specific challenges that we have in advancing this project. You know, we've been doing a lot of internal work. We did a few tours last fall with some stakeholder groups. And as hopefully things, you know, open up a little bit more, we'll be doing more of that. Obviously presenting to relevant organizations, agencies, and elected officials has been a big part of this as well. So there's a lot to do, but we're hopeful, you know, this year that we're really going to be able to take this project to a higher level and start making some of this a reality. So that is the Dutch Kills Loop, where we are March 2021. So
Thank you so much, Willis. I think, you know, the next 10 years, this is what it's going to look like for stakeholders all around the city along our waterways to get access to them along the coastline, and then ultimately get them cleaned up enough that we can get onto them and use them recreationally. So this is like a little prototype of what we will be doing around waterways throughout the city. There was an interesting op-ed, I think on City Limits this week, about street ends and making street ends be access points to our waterways, which I thought was right in keeping with what Newtown Creek Alliance is doing in terms of always keeping your street ends cleaned up and ready, ready for that to happen anytime.
yeah.
We really appreciate you presenting this to us. I feel like it's a prototype and a model that we can apply throughout the city over the next, between now and 2030, when we have to meet our clean water goals and our stormwater management goals. And we've got 9 years to do it. Everybody get going. Who's got questions for Willis and Holly? Anybody?
One from Lewis, wayside signage or signage to direct people. Is that part of the plan?
It is, yeah, that's something we talked about last year, and we're hoping to do that this year to install some signage around the area that you know, lets people know about this project that we're working on and ways to get involved. And you know, we're talking about ways too. There's a QR code, so it can take you to a website, so you could learn more about that specific area. So we're hopeful to deploy some signage this year around the site.
Mm-hmm. And I think you mentioned Nate Kensinger a minute ago, and he and his group did a little recorded tour of Dutch Kills called Listening to Dutch Kills, that sort of takes you on a walk around that tributary. That would be nice to sort of put that alongside your signage in some way, if we can still access that recorded tour. I know SWIM has a link on our website.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'd love to do that. And I think Nate, he actually texted me earlier today. He says he's around the creek. So yeah, we'd love to find ways to share more resources like that as well. So
yeah, because it really gives you this sort of, you wouldn't think to look at certain things that along his tour he tells you to stop and look at, that, you know, we just walk right past on a day when we're out walking around. So that would be a wonderful addition to your tools for sure. Anybody else?
It's more of a comment, but Leonel would love to work with you, Willis.
that'd be great. Yeah, we really welcome that. We're trying to find more ways for folks to help out, volunteers, obviously students, opportunities. So yeah, that'd be great to connect.
Yeah, and this is also a really good example of stakeholders working alongside municipal agencies, right? So that everybody's in a conversation together about what's going on around our waterways. And this is a great, again, a really great example of how we have to sort of engage with all the people at the table and keep the dialogue going. And because of this ongoing dialogue that you've had for many years now, you're starting to see action, and it does take time. Everything takes a decade, right? To come to fruition.
Yeah, so. For sure. And I think, you know, like developing more of a partnership with LaGuardia has been really valuable because I mean, it's a large entity, and you know, obviously folks like Holly, and Sarah have been, closely involved and engaged with, improving Newtown Creek for, many, many years, but having the interest of the college as a whole, I think is really going to open up
Yeah,
a lot more doors.
yeah, that's wonderful.
Now we just need money.
Right, right. Yeah,
But definitely we have a new president and just jumping in with him. Our old president was interested in this as well, but the new president from day one, we're just kind of saying, hey, here's a great project. Look at it, be
Mhm.
interested,
Mhm.
support it. So he's been really great so far.
Wow, that's great.
Louis has another question. Go ahead, Louis.
Yeah, I know that there's a monitoring going on, water monitoring going on at the site itself, but what about local citizen science monitoring for the benefit of, for educational purposes, as well as local posting of the results of that monitoring?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Holly and I had a chat last week actually about this, and one part of it is that we are looking to change our water quality monitoring protocols this season. The past few years has been fairly similar, and we are looking to basically make it more engaging of the broader community. So we're going to be looking at ways so that folks can, like the Water Trail Association does the majority of their sites, where volunteers can be taking those samples. LaGuardia was historically where we've processed those samples, but with COVID, there's been restrictions there. So hopefully that will be opening up again soon. And in terms of, there's other things that we could be monitoring as well, and Holly could speak about this, but her and some of the other professors have done other sampling, or like air quality sampling around the area. So we can certainly think about ways to engage more people with issues like that, and to post that information online. I'll also say that real quick, we're working with NYU now on an air sampling program around the creek. And so we're going to be identifying key areas to do air sampling, and that's not just particulate matter, but it's also various chemicals that are usually much more costly and complicated to do the sampling for. So we're really, I hate to say excited about it, but we're also a little worried about what some of the results may be. So that's something that we may be doing around Dutch kills as well, so we get a better sense of what we might be exposed to from whether it's the LIE or certain industries or whatnot. So
Louis, go ahead.
And in due course, an educational component for younger kids, kindergarten up.
Yeah, there's a lot of schools near the creek. So there are a few middle schools and a high school as well. And so we have done some programming with them in the past. And, it's with COVID, a lot of our program with the schools has basically just been put on hold. But certainly we want to reevaluate that in the future going forward, so that we can find ways that they, can sort of get involved and engaged with this as well. And certainly, that's, having something like the Montauk cutoff, having that come to fruition would be a real game changer for all those schools in this area. Right now, these are, there's truck routes, there's noise, there's, all this sort of like impacts on the street level that it's not, super conducive. It's not a super conducive outdoor environment for learning or enjoyment of nature. But if we were able to transform that decommissioned rail line into open space with environmental features that has, learning opportunities, blended in with that could really significantly improve the experience for the schools that are here.
Yeah, and I'll just add one other question, I suppose, which is, are there opportunities for outsiders such as me to get involved with your plan? With your project?
Absolutely. We certainly, welcome local Long Island City people to be involved, but absolutely anybody who is interested in open space and improving our waterways, help out. So, I can throw you onto our email list. Like I said,
Please.
We're starting these working groups in the coming week or so. So we'd love to have you, Louis.
Great. Mike DeLong, are you still on the line here? I just want to see if you have any other recommendations or comments regarding the DEC proposed amendments and any next steps that any of us need to take. I know we all submitted comment letters, but if there is anything else that we need to do as,
I don't think Mike is on the call anymore.
okay,
I don't see him.
okay. Well, we'll send out an e-blast and any information that we need to regarding follow-up on that, but we do need to follow that closely and keep our eyes on what happens next with those proposed amendments. So maybe at our next gathering, I'll ask Mike to give us an update on that. So I just wanted to open the floor to anyone who might have announcements that they want to make regarding anything coming up. Any programs that you want us to know about? If so, you can put them in the chat. And as noted, we've recorded this meeting, so we'll get it posted on a YouTube channel and send out a link to folks who want to, who didn't get to attend today, that want to go back and look at the meeting and see the presentations that we made. And we'll be following up with some e-blasts. And the other thing that we'd love to get input on from you is topics for our next public meeting. So think about that. Put some ideas in the chat if you have, if something comes to mind right away, and or send them to us at swimmablenyc@gmail.com. We'd love to have your input on our next public meeting. Louis, do you have one? Your hand is up.
Yeah, this has gone around through the human power boating blogs, etc. But many of you probably know about the turbines that are going into the East River to provide energy by way of water. And there's a meeting coming up available to anybody to get an insight on what Verdant Power is doing. And you can go into VERDANT Power, just Google them, and you can see it, or send me an email if you want, and I'll give you a link to be able to join that public meeting.
All right, thank you. And just don't forget, put your comments on the Environmental Justice for All report by April 30th, so that we can get a word to the city on what we think equal environmental justice looks like in New York City. And any other announcements? If not, I think we can finish a little bit early.
Yep. Before you all log off, there are a couple of things in the chat, so please make sure to either download and save the chat or cut and paste the resources that are in the chat. Louis, I see your hand up again.
No, not, I'm sorry.
Okay.
There we go.
Gotcha.
Well,
are you going to save this program on your website?
We're going to have it on a YouTube channel. We'll send a link out so that you can access the whole video of the meeting, but I don't know if the video captures the chat.
Yeah, well, I think that chat will be, well, I will save the chat anyway, so we can make that available.
Great.
Curated, yeah.
All right.
Julie, I just wanted to say, I noticed that the DEC extended the comment period for the proposed amendments to April 20th. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, yep. So if there's people that still want to comment,
oh, good,
included, we're gonna get ours in today. So.
Okay, good. Well, send it to me. Everybody who's writing a letter, please send it to SWIM so we can put it on our in our library of public comments. That's good. I'm glad they extended the comment period.
Yeah.
Yes, please do get your letters in. And, you know, maybe at our next meeting, we can have a more in-depth discussion about that and what it means to the Class I and SD waterways. And they're, you know, intended to be cleaned up for primary contact. And it seems that these actions are going to make it so that these waters will not be cleaned up for primary contact. And we've got to find a why that they're thinking that, if that is what they're thinking. And so hopefully we'll get a stakeholder meeting where we can get informed
Well,
and understand it better.
I
Yeah.
think that'd be a good discussion.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I did have one other thing. I almost forgot about it, but down at the Gowanus CAG, we are talking about our attempts to have the Gowanus reclassified for water quality. And in fact, we're talking to Willis to see whether Newtown Creek would like to join us in that operation. I mean, or put it another way, the more the better, the bigger the clout we have with the powers that be.
Great.
And Julie, I'll follow up with you on that because it would be great if SWIM could help us kind of coordinate and think through a process for that.
Sure. Happy to. Great. All right. Well, we can't thank you all enough for taking the time to be here with us today for these updates and for participating in the discussion. And thank you to Willis and Holly for the presentation on the Dutch Kills Loop. Thank you, Shino, for hosting us. Sean Dixon, welcome back. We're so glad you're with us. We can't wait to see you in person. And hope to see you all in person soon. Let's hope that all gets better and we can be gather in person sometime soon. So
And thank you, Julie, and thank you, Anna. We wouldn't be able to do this without the two of you, so
my pleasure. My
really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
All right, signing off.
Okay,
See you all soon.
have a wonderful
Bye.
evening,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.